Shuffle. Retard Molly.
All right, let's call this meeting to order. It's 12:15, Lane Regional Air Protection Agency Monthly Board of Directors Meeting, Thursday, January 11th, 2024, and it's still 12:15. First item would be, if we could call the roll,
Yes.
please.
Chair Fortune,
Here.
Vice Chair Saxon,
Here.
Director Fleck,
Here.
Director Bensley,
Here.
Director Keating, Director Johnston,
Here.
Director Lovell,
Here.
Director Plummer, Director Pictionary.
Here. And looks like Keating's.
Oh, great.
He already joined in as panelist, so yeah.
Present, if I just heard my name being called in as far as roll.
Thanks, Matt.
Great, thank you.
All right, next item 2 is adjustments to the agenda. Suzanne, is there anything that you have?
No.
Any directors have recommended adjustments to the agenda? Okay. Move on to 3, that's public participation, time limited to 3 minutes per speaker. First comments will be for items on today's agenda. Are there any comments? We don't have any public in the room except for staff and any online.
Staff, and then, for one of the agenda items, for the executive.
Yes, yep. Okay, no comments heard there, and so then we'll move on to comments on a topic not included on today's agenda, and with no public here, I don't think we're gonna have any of those either. Moving on is 4 is comments from board members. Any board members have a comment? No, I've got a couple. I will be in the jungle in February, so I will not be able to attend, and it'll be on the backside of the clock. I'll be in Sri Lanka. So I don't think I'll be able to make that meeting. I don't know if you're planning to attend or not, if you can share that with me. Okay. And I guess, yeah, and that's all. Yep.
Hey,
Matt has something.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, thank you. Just a request for our next month's meeting with the short, in advance of the short session. So we're not caught off guard or surprised as we've been in the past. If there's a way to get just a status report or an update on either DEQ or LRAPA lobbying efforts or any bills that have been filed that will affect our agency's work, and any positions that we may be taking or not taking on said bills. I would assume that with a legislative session launching February 5th, that it would be a timely
Different.
report.
Thanks, Matt. And Travis and Susanna, can you take that on?
yes, we will.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Moving on to consent calendar. Do I hear a motion?
Move approval.
I have a second.
I'll second.
All right, Mike has the motion, and we'll call Howard this time for the second. Any people have objection to it?
And just one quick comment. I love the new minutes. That is awesome. They're short to the point and I love them. That is awesome.
Good. I hope they did like it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I really appreciate it.
Heather
Yeah,
worked hard on doing some research to find some options to make it easier for you guys.
Here, they're great.
All right, no objections heard. The motion passes. Next is Citizens Advisory Committee with Jim. Is there a- we have to approve?
So our last meeting was in November. We reviewed the annual report that I'd submitted to the board, as required in our bylaws. And then Max gave us a permitting rulemaking review. And most of the time was spent on that. And some discussion about improving our committee member interviewing process. So as far as next meeting, we're gonna have a presentation by the company that's doing the search for director.
questions of Jim on this? Anything? Okay. Okay, thanks, Jim. Moving on to the executive director search. So a few comments before I've asked the recruiters to introduce themselves and kind of give them just a brief overview of what the project's going to look like. But a couple things to think about and that they're actually starting to look at is, as you know, we've been talking and discussing about the rules and the criteria for the hiring or for the executive director's qualifications. I know the staff attorney had done some investigation into the rules, just looked at them and see, you know, how that. So if any directors have concerns that maybe they needed the rules that exist now need to be altered, there is an opportunity to go into an executive session and get an idea of what your options are. But if the directors feel that the rules are fine the way they're written and we have enough leeway as directors to choose the right person, then it's not required. We'll just move forward. But so think about that as you go forward and look at the recruitment and as the candidates come forward. With that, what I'll do is ask Kara's consulting reps, Marissa and Dennis, to introduce themselves, and let's give us a brief overview of your plan and any questions and field questions from the directors.
Well, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members of the board, and thank you so much for carving out some time on your agenda to meet with us. For those of you who we haven't had the opportunity to talk with yet, I'm Marissa. Dennis is here as well. We're a father-daughter consulting team. And, you know, as you know, our firm specializes in top searches around the region, primarily for public-facing organizations, including work for other air agencies. So we're really looking forward to partnering with you on this important recruitment. Couple of things we were hoping to cover in our time with you today. One is would like to walk through the timeline and work plan, which is a draft, and kind of have you take a look at that, discuss some of the objectives and timing of those objectives, and then would like to spend a bit of time talking with you about compensation for the position as well. So.
Thank you,
If I
Marissa.
can, sure. I'm gonna give a shot here. It's just sharing my screen so that you can take a look at this draft timeline while we walk through that. So hopefully you're able to see this. So we're, you know, fully engaged in getting input and reviewing information about the organization. You know, have had the opportunity to talk with a number of you already and have some additional conversations scheduled, and a few of you have gotten back to me, and we'll get you set up too. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. So we've been, you know, learning about what's really important to you and candidates. We're going to set up a time to meet with the staff and as was just mentioned, spend some time with the Citizens Advisory Committee to learn what's important to folks on that committee as far as qualities, skills, abilities, experience, and the executive director. The staff has been really helpful in getting us a lot of information that we've been reviewing. So we're working on a job announcement, developing an outreach and advertising strategy, and then of course we'll refine this timeline. So we're really targeting to get started, you know, towards the end of this month, and actually commencing the search. So what we'd like to do is launch a national search. You know, we'll of course place advertisements, but really the bulk of our work will be direct outreach. So reaching out to potential candidates around the country, in the region, you know, inside the state, to see if they have an interest in the position. Parallel to that work, we'll be assessing the candidate pool. So every day we're looking at candidates on paper. We're interviewing candidates. So Dennis and I tend to interview a large percentage of the candidate pool just to make sure we don't miss anyone who, you know, may not jump out on paper. So we'll be updating the search committee or the committee that's most closely involved with us on the initial part of the search every week, kind of letting them know what's going on. We're always available, you know, to answer questions or attend a board meeting like this to provide an update. But typically, leaving that recruitment open for about 5 or 6 weeks to give kind of a soft deadline for people to submit materials to us. And then what would happen is we would come forward with, you know, a list of the top tier of candidates and some supplemental information about those candidates. We'll have interviewed all of those candidates. Those would be our recommended candidates. Usually sort of the next tier down would be the B list candidates, and then a list of everyone who's applied for the job. And again, meeting with that committee to have a really in-depth and robust discussion about candidates on paper, and then making some selections about folks that you'd like to move into an interview process. So looking at really, you know, the late part of March and early April, where we move into an interview process where the committee is involved, of course, you all being involved in interviews, and ultimately putting you in a position to make a selection towards the end of April. We do a lot of preliminary background on candidates, but once you're down to a smaller number of candidates, we do a very in-depth background where we're talking to, you know, not just references, but individuals who've reported to the candidates, people who the candidates have reported to, elected officials, stakeholders, community partners, business, kind of you name it, but we provide you with a really comprehensive report on the candidates. You know, to us, it's a very important part of the process to really do an in-depth background and give you all the information that you need to put you in a position to make the best possible selection. So any questions about this timeline? This is, you know, none of this is set in stone, so we're flexible on this timing. In our experience, this is sort of a timing that works well to attract a really high quality and diverse candidate pool, but we can certainly shorten things up or make changes to this now or as we go along, but wanted to put this in front of you to take a look at. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thanks, Marissa. I think Joe has a question for you.
Hello, Marissa. I actually used to do police backgrounds on candidates and whatnot, and I'm not sure, I don't know what technique you used, but when I did mine, I did secondary and trinary interviews when it comes to coming in contact with somebody that worked with the candidate and then asking them, hey, do you know, is there anybody that also worked with them? So that way you don't get a name from any candidate in any actual close reference. And then I asked that after I get the name of the person that, hey, do you know anybody else that might know them? I asked that person the same question. And that's where I got most of the information that was most intriguing.
Yeah, great comment. And we follow that exact methodology. So we spend, you know, time with names that are provided to us by the candidates, and then we use that as a source for other additional information and more contacts to reach out to. And sometimes, you know, we might even know people who know the candidates. So that can be really helpful to us in, you know, talking with someone that you know and trust always gives you really good information. So we're very comprehensive and yeah, follow that exact methodology. So thanks for bringing that up.
Any other questions for Marissa and Dennis, staff or directors? Marissa, one thing, you referred to an accelerated timeline. So if the board opted for an accelerated timeline, what do you see as dropping out of this as far as what you probably wouldn't have time to do?
Yeah, so, you know, sometimes an accelerated timeline can look like shortening up the recruitment time period. And I think there's some trade-offs in doing that. Sometimes it's a trade-off in quality of the candidates, because oftentimes passive candidates are the kinds of candidates we're really trying to attract to this position. People who are, you know, happily employed elsewhere, may not even be thinking about this position. It takes some time for them to, you know, think it over and make applications. So that's what we see as one of the main trade-offs in sort of shortening the recruitment time period. Another place that we could shorten things up or tighten things up is just in process. So, you know, depending on how many rounds of interviews, who's going to be involved in those interviews, and you know, how much involvement you need to have in this process, that can be another tightening point for the recruitment. So, you know, it's really your recruitment, and we're happy to fit it into whatever timeline is, you know, most desired by the board, but those would be probably the two areas. And I think the trade-off sometimes in tightening up the interview process, you know, you can move swiftly, but sometimes you're not able to involve as many people as you'd like. So
Thanks for that. And, you know, while we're on this, we did establish a committee to look and develop the RFP, which was Mike and Joe and Howard and I believe was the four. Am I right there, Susanna? I think so. So you refer to a committee that's going to be involved in the recruitment. Do we want to have a different committee or do we want to maintain that same committee? I'd like to offer some of the other directors, if they wanted to participate in that, to come, because I'll be happy to step down because it looks like lion's share of the work's done in February. And as I mentioned, I'll be gone for 3 weeks. So I'll be happy to step aside and let another director come on board and just kind of maintain an overview of it. But I don't know if anyone has a.
Smiling.
I'll jump in for you. Okay, so, Jerry, he will be the new member of the recruitment committee, Marissa.
Okay.
Along with the names I already passed, and you can remove my name.
Okay, thank you.
Jared, Mike, Howard, and Joe. Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure I didn't say like.
Thanks, Jerry.
Early, well, in transparency, early April, I'm not gonna be available. I'll be in Mexico, but
Okay,
that doesn't mean, but I can still have contact, so I'll just be electronic.
okay.
All
Yeah,
right,
and
go ahead, Marissa.
we can work with your schedules in advance to kind of coordinate some of these activities. Really, most of the work that will happen as far as the committee will, occur once the soft deadline has passed. So we'll be looking at sort of the March and April to schedule some things and we can get to work on getting those set up, sooner than later. So we're not running into creep on the scope and timeline because of scheduling.
Thanks, Marissa. Any directors have thoughts on the schedule? Is it right? It is.
I don't want to shorten it or expedite it. I'm gonna do a good job.
Anyone have a desire to shorten it? Good. All right, so we'll stick to your schedule, Marissa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it over to Dennis. We wanted to just talk with you a bit about the compensation for the position.
Yeah, thanks, Marissa. Good afternoon. Thanks for sharing your agenda with us this afternoon, and we're looking forward to working with you. I wanted to share some salary information and job comparisons with you. Essentially, I'd say that we're fairly familiar with compensation levels for comparable air quality executive directors in the Northwest. As you know, LRAPA is the only air agency in Oregon, I think, other than the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. So most of the comparables are found in Washington. In our estimation, the organizations in Washington that are similar in mission, scope, and size would be the Olympic region, which is, I think, headquartered in Olympia, the Southwest region, which is headquartered in Vancouver, Washington, and then the Northwest region in Mount Vernon, Washington. They currently compensate their directors from about $170,000 to $180,000. I would say that this is probably reinforced by a survey that you all did. I think it was in the spring of last year, showing that your executive director position was 28 to 37% below comparable positions when comparing mid-salary ranges. So we just wanted you to have that information to take into consideration when determining what the appropriate range would be. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Joe, please.
What came up in those discussions, if I recall, was that the economy up in Washington or the comparable areas of the Washington is quite a bit different than Lane County. And so that's typically when we do staffing locally, is that we do consider regional cost of livings. And there is a significant, we have seen there's a significant different cost of living in Washington, especially the peninsula areas and the areas you mentioned. So I don't know I think we should take a look at that and make the appropriate adjustments, because I don't think we're that far off in regards because of that.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. If we looked at Eastern Washington, for example, and maybe some of the rural areas, Benton County might be a good example. They're a much smaller organization, but I think they're paying about $140. So their cost of living might be comparable, maybe even a little less than.
Mike,
Does somebody have that number, what we're currently paying? I don't remember that.
Just a hair over 143.
Okay.
So we're in the ballpark there.
So we are, but I also know, it just in my own agency alone, that with inflation that I have had to, bite the bullet. If I want good candidates, I have to make sure I'm competitive. So once again, I don't wanna, break the bank, but I also want to make sure that we're, competitive and that we're actually gonna attract some good applicants.
Dennis, if we were gonna make an adjustment, when would we have to have made that decision?
Well, it would be good to make the decision before we actually begin the recruitment, because of the announcement that goes out. We'll be posting that salary range.
And what was that target date? Again, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you have to pay the top dollar of the range, but it would give you some flexibility if you found someone who was exceptional in your estimation and maybe wanted to pay them more than you're paying presently.
And looking towards the end of this month to maybe wanting to solidify that.
Okay, thanks, Marissa. Howard.
Yeah, Dennis, I assume that you have received information from staff as far as the other pieces of the compensation, health and care, and the state's PERS program, retirement program, which the agency now is a participant in.
Yeah.
So I guess you'll factor all that in until the compensation.
Yeah, we have looked at that. Thank you.
So I guess we could kick it to the recruitment committee to make a recommendation. Would that make sense to the directors? I'm sorry.
Just a quick question. So what was, if anyone knows, what was the range for the last recruitment? I know you said a hair over 143, but was there a range that we used for the previous executive director similar?
Started at 130.
Yeah, I remember 137.
130 comes to my head.
As the low end or
I
as
don't
the?
have any of my electronics with me, but if you look at the
Where we landed on.
September's board agenda had the flyer in it. I don't know, they have the flyer too, I think. Thought it was in the
From the last time.
130, 115 range or something like that.
Yeah. I think what happens is you post a range and then depending on experience and
Yeah, that's how it works.
qualifications, et cetera. And it can sometimes be a fairly large range, at least in other industries. Not certain what we've done in the past. Okay, I can,
So with the negotiation.
yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, as a board, given it's a range, we're not tied down.
Right, yeah.
We could start at 130 and take it to, I don't know.
50, 105, whatever. It doesn't really matter. So
Right, it's gonna be a negotiation, so
Just,
160 might attract more people if they see that number.
yeah, but reduces our bargaining power too, if you gotta get too high.
We might start where we're at too, they're gonna be able to look at that and know, and to hire somebody at less than you're paying your current person. I mean, once again, part of the negotiation, you might say, for the first 6 months and, depending on an evaluation, there'll be a 3% increase and then, so I guess I'm okay with either way.
Howard.
Well, when you're looking at the higher ranked candidates, I assume that you'll be asking that person what their compensation expectations are. So if someone comes in saying, well, I need to have 200,000, well, we know that that's going to be out beyond what we're going to be able to pay. So I assume that you'll be doing that kind of filtering for us.
Yeah, that's a good comment. We're always kind of feeling the candidates out as to what their salary expectations are. So that we don't want surprises at the end of the recruitment where you find someone that you feel is a good fit for the role, but yet all of a sudden they're asking more money than was indicated initially in the range that was being offered. So yeah, we're constantly going over the salary with them. Not that on a rare occasion you'll have someone ask for more than that, but generally, we want to feel comfortable that they've talked with others in their family or friends, others that are going to be involved in this to ensure that, they're pretty steady on the salary before you make the offer to them.
Just one other question. Did, as part of the announcement that we had previously, was there any indication as far as what a relocation package would look like, or have we had that discussion of what that would look like?
It was the $5,000, up to $5,000 for a relocation packet, and they had to provide expenses to back that up. And that was in their contract as well.
That wasn't mentioned in the posting the last time, and the salary range that was advertised in the last posting started at 90,456 and popped out at 122,400.
Wow, a lot lower than you thought.
Whoa.
So that was what was posted on the.
So we
last
overpaid.
That was SRT.
How long ago was that?
That was in 2020.
Well, my only comment is that I know we can't do a big reload package, but that might be a little on the low side. I know when
So
I
we
moved,
just did,
I know when I moved up here on my own from Oklahoma to Eugene, even with my large company discount, you know, it was like $12,000 just to move my household goods up here. And I'm sure it's a lot more than that now. So it just might be an issue if we get someone that's from outside the region, you know, that could be a deal killer if we're only offering
So the
5,000.
director was given 5, but LRAPA's policy is 2,500.
Okay.
And then to not make things so complicated, we as a management team decided it should just be a flat stipend and not have to go through all the expenses and that stuff, so that we would just give you the 2,500 to relocate and use as needed to get here. No matter your location, but we did notice when we were reviewing that the previous director did get a higher amount.
Isn't there a sort of a softer statement you can put in that just says negotiable? Something
well,
like that.
Or
and
just
that's
state,
also one-time expenses. Those are, you know,
Yeah.
of less concern to me than
Yeah.
ongoing wages.
can you just put a little note, relocations.
Matt's got his hand up.
Available,
Stipend available.
can't speak today.
You're still muted.
I don't know who offered it, but I like the idea of perks or incentives negotiable with the approval of board upon consideration of hire or something like that. Just I don't know who said it, but giving us a little more flexibility should there be a candidate on the East Coast, let's say, that might be a little more expensive for their moving costs, et cetera. Giving this board the most flexibility for the right candidate, I think, is the most appropriate avenue. So thanks to whoever said it at the table.
Dennis, do you see that in your recruitments, kind of a soft statement like that?
Yeah, that's very common and it gives you some flexibility.
Okay. Any other questions? We'll move on. So I guess you want to have a recommendation from the committee on the range, or do we want to just decide one now? Are we happy with the 130?
Sounds like we've decided.
Okay, 130 to
60.
okay. Did you catch that, Marissa?
I didn't. I'm sorry
Yes.
if you could repeat it.
130 to 160 for a salary range.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
I appreciate both of you for taking the time to dial in and give us some information. Looking forward to the next few months.
Thanks again for having us. We're excited to be working with you. Looking forward to talking with those of you we haven't had the opportunity to connect with yet.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, on to item 8, which is the employee handbook. Suzanne, do you have some opening remarks here?
Just that, our legal counsel did do the review. And being that he's also a writer, he did take this, a pretty good handle on it and rearranged its order. He turned it to more of a flowing process. And there's a bunch of tiny changes, but most of them were clarifying language. And we walked through scenarios and we're like, well, that sounds great. Clean those up a little bit, updated the alcohol and stuff to be more in line with actual alcohol policies for things like that, and softened word languages, or not softened, but updated some of the word choices that sounded really outdated, and then clarified for things for performance issues when it comes to some things. Cleaned up the social media section where it talks about understanding that we're government employees, and so our Facebook posts are also a part of the agency and we're held accountable for those things. By rearranging the order, Matt, that also helped kind of clean up some of the choppiness of where things were kind of stated one way and then worded different another, so the flow's better. So that's kind of what he did. So there was nothing like super surprising that was difficult to change, or that we were in any real risk, but adding the government piece was probably the biggest added part. And he mostly put that in the social media section back towards the end in 50-51, where he gets into social media and stuff and kind of clarifies that and clarifies why our drug policy is the way it is, even though because we're a government agency and follow federal standards. So we just clean up some of those things. So I don't know how much more you want to go into that or what questions you may have.
Well, let's see if we have a motion and then we can go into discussion.
I don't remember what theirs is, but I move, the board approve the, employee, manual.
I think it's the LRAPA Employee Handbook version 2024.
I
Thank you.
changed the number.
I move that we approve the LRAPA employee handbook version 2024.
Second.
Is that Mike?
Dave.
Yes.
All right, motion made by Mike, seconded by Dave. Any discussion, any questions to the staff on this handbook?
I got one spot on page 54 and 5, under political activity. That's come up in different places where I'm exposed to, and it does says during working hours. And that's may suggest or look at as saying while engaged in LRAPA business. So that means that in addition to that, so that way, while a person, if they're conducting LRAPA business or working on LRAPA business, it doesn't lock in or have the argument of, well, that's not my normal working hours, or this is, these are my hours and I'm not getting paid for, or whatever. If they're doing LRAPA business and engaged in political activity, should be prohibited. But I'm just throwing that out there. It's not, I'm not stuck in the mud on it.
Well, and on 51, it kind of goes through a little more detail on that too, so I don't know if that helped, but 51, when it's talking about confidential LRAPA information and request employee for social media, that kind of information.
I'm talking about political activity.
55, and you said that was on
4 and 5.
54 and 5.
Right, bottom of 54, top of 55.
Okay, so just add.
Yeah, just look at, I mean, I just throw that out there because it's, I've seen people that they try to defend
Mhm.
themselves from an activity when they're saying that that wasn't their normal work hours. But
Okay.
they were at a meeting conducting the organization business, but then declared a break and said that wasn't my work hours.
Mhm.
In the military, they'd say on duty, but
On duty.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
same thing, and that's exactly right, anytime you're on duty. But if you're at a meeting or so that way you can't necessarily declare I'm on a break, so therefore I'm not on work hours, therefore I can engage in political activity.
It does say, you know, to the extent prohibited by Oregon law, and actually Oregon law is pretty prescriptive around employees and what they can and can't do around elections. So, I mean, the laws are definitely gonna be much more.
Okay, so don't change it.
Well, I'm just offering, you know, I'm just offering that, you know,
that?
yeah.
all right, so why don't we just, so none of you just touch Blake real quick.
Yeah, I'll
Ask
just
him that
ping him, and
question.
if he thinks
If it's
it's-
changing, then change it. If not, all right with everyone?
Yeah.
I can do that.
Susanna, is there anywhere in the handbook now that says that it'll be reviewed every 2 years, or should we add that to the motion?
You can add that to the motion if you like, that's fine. It doesn't say that in the handbook, but that is a good policy going forward. Actually, I just had my CSI thing today and they said every year be it kind of extreme, but 2 would be good.
Or is necessary, depending on changes.
Yeah, the law changes
Federal or
next year.
state law.
Mhm.
That you won't get locked into a time frame in case something else comes up that's sucking up your time. It turns out to be 3 years.
That's gonna sound great.
Matt?
Thanks. I was frozen there for a second, so apologies. I appreciate Commissioner Piscineri bringing this piece up, but I'm cautious about, quote, limiting political activity when there's already Oregon State Statute 260.432 that indicates the restrictions that are imposed by state law around public employees soliciting any money, influence, or service or anything of value otherwise to oppose or promote any political committee or promote or oppose the nomination or election of a candidate. And then, you know, it makes it really clear that that particular ORS doesn't prohibit the employee from expressing political views. And the way I interpret the comments made earlier is broadly prohibiting political views potentially limits one's free speech. So if, for example, someone at their cubicle could have a Jimmy Carter or Ronald Reagan bumper sticker all day long, those are their political views that shouldn't be infringed upon. But there's already existing ORS that prohibits quote unquote engaging in political activity during or when one is on the job during working hours. And it lays out exactly what that political activity is. And that's essentially the raising of money or collecting signatures. And so I would like us, rather than reinvent the wheel, is just point to the existing ORS and embrace the 260.432 that makes it very clear what the guardrails are for public employees.
Okay, thanks. Donnie, can you wrap that into the question,
Yep.
Blake?
Yes,
See
I
if we-
can.
if there's anything
And
we do.
and just for your board's knowledge, we are planning a training for the employees and management team on Oregon public meeting law rights and that kind of stuff as well. So they're all updated on that information. We had a general one when I first got in this chair, but we will do a formal one with CIS or Blake, whoever's available to give the training for that. So we're sensitive to public notices and those kind of things and the same topic here.
Thank you. Is there an amendment to the motion to talk about the review? Does anyone want to make that,
Oh, you mean,
the review of the handbook, periodicity of it?
that's a question, yes. Do we want to put it to a next meeting or do we want to actually just approve it with?
So do you
language?
want it to clarify in your approval that we will review it every year at a minimum, bring it back every two?
Oh, I thought we were talking about the amendment we're proposing for this section.
Oh,
No, I was thinking that Susanna could just take it back to the staff attorney and see if there was a change warranted, and if not, let it provide it. So,
Okay,
you know, we should be okay with that.
so
Or I
I
can just scratch it. It's not, it's making a mountain out of a molehill.
okay,
I'm scratching it, Matt.
okay, so I would like to amend my
I'll do the
motion
training though.
to include adding that this shall be reviewed. What was the comment we wanted to make as far as when legislation
Regularly or as needed.
regularly
Or did we
or as
say,
needed based on changes in regulation?
that's fine, or, cause I thought the one initial discussion was like every 2 years.
Mhm.
And I think the other piece that the or as needed, based on changes in state or federal regulations.
I like it, what Howard said.
Dylan.
Hi, Dylan.
Yeah. I think Howard just got it, but like I was thinking maybe like 2 years or as needed.
Sounds great.
Okay, any other discussion on
We
that?
need our second to also.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So that was your amendment?
I,
You amended
yes,
your own?
I amended my own motion, so we need the second. to approve.
second the amendment.
Thank you.
Motion made by Mike, seconded by Dave. The motion was to approve the LRAPA employee handbook version 2024 and review it every 2 years or as needed. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
You okay with that? All right, call for a vote, please.
Chair Cutchin,
Aye.
Vice Chair Saxon.
Aye.
Director Fleck,
Aye.
Director Hensley,
Aye.
Director Keating,
Aye.
Director Johnston,
Aye.
Director Lovell,
Aye.
Director Plummer,
I
Director Pictionary,
Yes.
Wonderfully unanimous. Okay. Moving on to the audit report, Susanna. Or who's- No, I'm sorry. Do we have someone on Weiser?
Not in it yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't snuck in. I was used to your
New
boss,
guy.
I guess, yeah.
So, my name is Gatlin Hawkins. I'm here in the stead of Paul Nielsen, as he is currently in the middle of the ocean and is spending some time with family. But I worked this year on the audit with our audit team and with Jenna Lee and Susanna. And we had a great time, and we were able to get everything that we needed to provide an opinion on LRAPA's financial statements for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023. And we are expressing an unmodified or a clean audit opinion on those financial statements. Our responsibility as auditors is to test the balances and the information that is presented in the financial statements and to determine whether it materially complies with generally accepted accounting principles. Management ultimately is responsible for all of the information within the financial statements and for presenting that information. And we do provide some assistance with preparing those financial statements just to make sure all the disclosures are in there and everything balances and is presented accurately. In doing our audit, we don't provide 100% assurance, right? So we're looking at it to say, are they accurate enough that somebody could use that information to make a decision and arrive and not be misled by the financial statements? So we use that concept of materiality. And so it's possible that there could be some small errors or typos or misclassifications within the financial statements, but we didn't come across anything that we felt was so large that anybody would be misled. We perform our testing through reviewing source documents, selecting samples of transactions and reviewing those to see if they were recorded correctly within the agency's systems. We also perform various types of analytical procedures to see how things change over time or in relation to one another. In addition to looking at the balances that are being presented and the information in the footnotes, we also are required by professional standards to evaluate the internal controls and processes that are in place that lead to the information that gets recorded. Whenever we encounter a misstatement or an error, or as we're looking over the internal controls and we see some area where there could be maybe some improvement or some best practices that could be implemented, we evaluate the significance of that, of the potential error that could result from a process not being implemented or perhaps missing a piece. And broadly, we have two classifications. The first would be what we would call a significant deficiency, which is an error or something missing in the process that it's not going to result in a material misleading error during the year we're auditing, but if left unaddressed, it could lead to a material error in the future, or it maybe is something that we feel is significant enough that it warrants special attention and want to make sure that gets corrected. The second type of deficiency we could have is what we would call a material weakness in internal controls, which means that it either did result in a material misstatement or there was the potential for a misstatement to be material because of that. Now, this year we had some changes in auditing standards that required us to start looking more at IT programs and controls in place over information technology. As more and more things become automated and we're relying more on computers to process transactions, the AICPA has updated those auditing standards so that we have to look at those more to make sure that's not a new avenue for errors to be introduced into financial data. And so as we were reviewing that and documenting that in accordance with the new standards, we noted that the previous accounting system, SAGE, one user login profile was being shared amongst all of the staff. And that, well, that didn't result in any actual misstatements as far as we could tell. It did have the potential for somebody to go in, access that program, make changes, and not have adequate evidence for the support of that, or even be able to tell necessarily who made those changes. And so we felt that under these new auditing standards, that really did constitute a material weakness within the internal controls present in that system. In addition to that issue, we also, as we were preparing the financial statements and we were looking at the accruals related to vacation and compensated absences, in the initial calculation that we received, The accrual had been calculated using each employee's total accrued hours times their hourly rate, where the policy that was in place during the fiscal year we were looking at put a cap on the amount of hours that could be cashed out by employees at separation based on their tenure of service. And so as we applied those limits that were established in the policy, the amount being accrued for compensated absences was reduced from an initial figure of $319,000 to $164,000. And that change has been made and reflected in the financial statements. In addition to, well, actually, let me pause there before we start talking about compliance auditing. I know I'm throwing kind of a lot of information out there. Are there any questions on the audit, what we do generally, the statements, or the two deficiencies that we just discussed?
Did you have to do a single audit this year
We did, yeah.
on the tag grant?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Only didn't have any findings on that. That was in the report. So I guess I'd like to have a copy of the audit. I was a little surprised that we were asked to do a resolution to accept it without actually having received it. And
Sorry about that. The bucket was a little big.
and I guess
We'll get it up online.
you know, I mean, I certainly understand your explanation, but I also have never been on a body that had a material weakness. That's a significant problem. You know, significant deficiencies come up from time to time based on stuff that I guess I'm just a little concerned because we're saying there aren't any material misstatements, but you're just sampling. You don't have, you know, 100%, you know, proof that there wasn't. And I guess I'm a little bit of a, you know, finance wonk, and so this worries me a little bit. So, you know, share with me, you know, what level of concern. I know as an auditor, you have a very strict, you know, expectation of what you have to report. What I'm hearing you say is we had to do this, but I guess what I'd also like is your opinion as our auditor, you know, are the corrective, you know, measures proposed, you know, going to make sure that we are going to be taking care of the situation going forward.
Yeah, so the reason for classifying this as a material weakness rather than a significant deficiency, when we're looking at a potential issue there, we evaluate its pervasiveness throughout the financial statements and financial data, as well as the potential impact it could have. And so since this shared login really affected all of the financial data, right, because it was everything that was in the system, as well as, you know, there not being any controls within the system that would limit what could be done using that login, we really felt kind of forced into classifying as a material weakness. There were compensating controls in place for the transactions. You know, a lot of transaction data is not recorded solely within the system. There's other records available that we can look at and use to validate that. And as we're performing our audit testing using sampling and things like that, we do have thresholds where if there's, we call it a high value threshold, right? So if there's any transactions over a certain amount, we're going to look at all of those transactions and then we'll sample the remaining. And our sample is designed, you know, randomly and to be statistically valid to provide us with a 95% assurance, you know, that we're seeing what actually is occurring there. And so, yes, well, it is a control deficiency within IT. Like I said, we didn't see any evidence that it had resulted in any actual misstatements.
And we had appropriate documentation for transactions, journal entries, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that actually kind of leads into the next item I was going to talk about the compliance auditing, including the single audit of the TAG grant, and looking at that, because as we do a single audit, we also then have to perform our entire audit under government accounting and auditing standards. And those standards require us to report any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses we identify, not just in the federal awards, but in internal controls over financial reporting. And so that's why these two deficiencies are included in the printed report. However, we do clearly differentiate between those that are related just to the general kind of financial statements versus compliance. And in addition to not having any compliance findings this year, we also looked at and followed up on the compliance finding from the previous year that was related to the documentation available to demonstrate the performance of internal controls. And we determined that that had been corrected during the year we looked at, so that's not a continuing finding. And also that matter has been closed by the EPA as well. They did their follow-up and were satisfied with the corrective action taken there as well. So that's all in kind of those back reports at the end of the financial statements.
With regard to the error that you found as far as the liability accrual, all that, did that have any impact on general administrative overhead that the agency charges EPA for its grants that it receives? And was there any need to make any adjustments there?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Generally, grant billings will be based off of actual expenses paid rather than recalculating accruals each month and billing that way. So this accrual for compensated absences really only happens at the end of the year for the financial statement presentation. So changes in that shouldn't impact grant billings or calculated overhead rates.
We're also, we're capped at a certain amount in any case, like we're only approved to bill so much.
Okay,
So even if it would have been not allowed, it would have been thrown back.
but you still have it's a cost reimbursable contract, isn't it?
It is to a point when it comes to the payroll.
Tier.
So you're only approved 65% of, say, Susanna's salary.
Mhm.
And if Susanna's, but at Susanna's salary at that set time of the grant.
Okay.
So if Susanna gets a raise and you guys are like, she's great, we're gonna give her an extra $100,000. It does not matter.
For what gets billed to the grant.
Yeah, what
grant's
gets billed to the
locked.
grant. The grant is locked at that dollar amount and that percentage.
And then so in addition to the financial statements and the compliance for the federal grants and government auditing standards, we also perform procedures required by Oregon law. We look at the process for adopting and amending budgets, as well as whether budgets are being overspent and things like that. Oregon law requires us to look at how the entity invests its funds to ensure that those are fully insured and collateralized or are being invested in allowable sources. We look at the procurement process to ensure that those procurements are following state statute and are providing for full and open competition. And then the state also requires us, whenever we have a reported significant deficiency or material weakness, to include that communication of those and provide a copy of that to the state. And then the Oregon statutes require the board to adopt that corrective action plan that's prepared by management by resolution, and then file that with the state within 30 days of the issuance of our report. That's concludes my presentation, unless there's any additional questions.
Well, why don't we see if we have a motion and then we go into further discussion, please.
I'll move that the LRAPA board adopt resolution 24-01. Or is that the approval of the findings?
That's I was gonna go through that, this is our answer to those actions. So we just need you guys to approve it. And I have a quick overview up there if you wanna be too long, didn't read. It's all right there.
Do you want me to advance this?
That would be their voting turn or not voting turn or discussion turn.
So the motion was made by Mike and seconded by Howard. Do we need to have some discussion on this? I know that if there were concerns, you didn't get to see the audit, but
And I'd still like to.
Yes,
we will get that out to you
I think,
today.
which is why I was being a little direct with our, auditors to make sure that I have a good feel and understanding for where we're at.
I will send it to you. Actually, if I can give you a copy of it right now if you wanna.
No, that's fine. Just,
you're okay moving forward.
I am okay moving forward with this, because we're saying, yes, the corrective actions we're gonna take, and I feel confident that we're gonna do that. But like I said, this is pretty significant. I needed to feel like we were really on top of this, and I do.
And the important thing is Cassell fixes that, because Cassell has individual logins. Each person has user right controls. So people who don't do payroll don't see payroll. And we got those things set up after the onboarding. We kind of left it. We did some cross training with everybody, but now we're down to our individual things. We also come reports to see what every single person has done under their login. So getting rid of Sage was a big push for this one issue, because Sage was so outdated. So a lot of it was fixed as of July 1st.
Yeah, and there's just one other comment I wanted to make that I had written in pen. In October, the agency joined PERS, and that you will not see any information about that in this year's financial statements, even though the agency was in the system for most of the year. And that's due to the PERS actuary reports, and their projections are all performed using a date that's at least 1 year, sometimes 2 years in the past. So while that's not here, that will be something that will most likely be presented in next year's financial statements. And those can create some fairly large liabilities and deferred inflows and outflows. We don't know what the exact impact of that's going to be, but just be prepared for that as you're stepping in and taking on a small portion of the combined liability of all persons.
Okay, any directors have questions of generally or the auditor at all? Concerns? And so the audit still hasn't been filed with Secretary of State. It'll go with this.
It has been filed.
Oh, it has been filed? Okay.
Yeah, we typically like to submit that to the state as soon as we issue.
And submitted it to the federal clearinghouse as well, I assume.
That will be done once the corrective action's approved. I want to make sure there weren't any changes to that corrective action plan before we submit it.
That's for the single audit.
If there's no other questions, we will go to a vote. Please.
Chair Cutchin,
Aye.
Vice Chair Saxon,
Aye.
Director Flegg,
Hi.
Director Hensley,
Aye.
Director Keating.
Aye.
Director Johnston,
Aye.
Director Level,
Aye.
Director Plummer,
Aye.
Director Pictionary.
Yes.
All right, motion passes.
All right, then we'll be moving forward. I want to apologize. I thought he was going to bring us branded paper copies.
Sorry.
I'm like, a branding opportunity was missed. So I wanted to
Time before doing that. We'll give him some grace.
I'll help you with some sales stuff later.
Made him turn the color of his logo though.
He matches it. That's what happens. You have an auditor sitting next to an auditor, right? Generally, he's an auditor.
Hoping there's not a box or envelope on my desk. I'll printed copies in it up to bring.
All right, so this, we're going to go ahead and do a belated Q1 finance budget report. And I should mention that while I've done a deep dive in the financials, I wasn't actually here. So if there's context questions, I might have to throw to Susanna. Okay, so I would like to start on like the accomplishment. The main first quarter accomplishment is that the finance team implemented the whole new, deeply complicated system, Cassell. And to be clear, this is not like implementing QuickBooks. And I put this in July because that's when they went live, but the transition was months in the making and took the whole first quarter. I want to recognize the staff who dealt with this transition. I said, it's very, very complicated, and they were simultaneously learning how to use it. So these are very impressive people. We also, during that quarter, brought on Carissa, who's a wonderful AP specialist, and they implemented Express Bill Pay, which is also not a small feat with Cassell. And then they did all of this while working on the audit and the single audit response work. So this was a very busy quarter, and they did a lot of work, and they should be complimented. Next slide, please. So this is the agency overall. Generally in fund accounting, we don't look at the organization as a whole. Usually you look at the funds. And I wanted to take a minute because I think this is very important as a view of an agency health. As you can see, right now we are recognizing basically $2 of additional revenue for every extra dollar of expense, which is fabulous. But it's also a little bit misleading. Previously, in the prior years, they didn't recognize tag as revenue when it came in. They had, when you look, it's a complicated due to, due from system that are liability and asset accounts, but there was no revenue booked in the tag account until the end of the year. So they would basically like just accrue it and then pay themselves at the end of the year, probably to ensure that they were at a zero balance at the end of the year for tag, since you have to be. If you make that adjustment to the same accounting style, but I'm using it instead of a liability as revenue, a very complicated, weird system, then it is, the revenue is only up by 17.5%, which means that you're basically making a buck for a buck, which is not terrible. So if the first quarter revenues were driven by permitting, this is in line with previous years. And over time, the grants will catch up. The first quarter expenses were driven mainly by payroll. It's 50% of all of our expenses. This is in line with most government agencies. Materials and services were 45% and capital outlay was 5%. We are at 20, was it 20? Hold on. Where's my line? So I want to give you the exact percentage. Agency-wide, for the budget, we have 2 green lights. We've received 29% of our expected revenues so far and spent only 24% of our budget in that first quarter. So we are exactly where we should be for the quarter. Next slide, please. So this is, okay, I'm gonna go through the funds individually. This is, each of them will have a balance sheet on the bottom. It's an infographic. We didn't really have the fund balances in place yet at this point, so they're a little bit grain of salt. And you'll mainly see that they are cash and fund balance. And then there's a little tiny slivers for like AR, BP. So this is the general fund, and you'll see that the revenue is up 10% from the prior quarter, or the quarter last year, and that we're at 23% of the budget. And that expenditures were at 25% of the budget and up 26% from last year. The materials and services and capital outlay is 46% up. And you might be wondering why. It's because there was no capital project last year. So those are usually high dollar expenses that we just didn't have. And I wanted to combine them so that you could see the total percentage up. The personnel is up 17%. That is due to a change in allocation. And then also there's the addition of PERS and increased salaries. You'll see on other funds though that the other funds actually have negative increases from the prior year. And that's due to the allocations mainly and because of staffing. Yes.
Can I jump in? Why are we allocating staff towards the general fund instead of the other programs? I mean, what's
They're
driving?
allocated between all of the programs.
Right, but are they spending more time doing something different? I mean,
We're still trying to calculate that so that we can have an accurate way and we always go back and.
that's what I was
adjust,
wondering.
but
What is your cost allocation process?
We have not changed it from when it was set up yet, and I'm not sure.
Yeah, we have it the same for what the budget approved for FY 24's budget that was set even, I didn't even set that allocation. But what we've done is we're still leaving that as is, but we now with Cassell, we have a live tracking system of the employees that have multiple fund activities. So they're on their timesheets are tracking their activities in those funds. And then we're going to be running, we're about halfway through the year, pretty close. We're going to be running some reports to see what that percentage allocation looks like against the budget to help us for more efficiencies going forward. And use that on as a consistent basis for checking, because the old system didn't really let us reality in very well.
Thank you.
Yes, and we'll have to go bring that back through too as part of the budget, because like right now, we wouldn't even be allowed to because you guys haven't approved it to go elsewhere. And you might also notice that it is 26 and 31 on there and then 25, and you're like, that math doesn't work. For the percent of budget on the expenditures, and it's because in the total final budget, there is $100,000 contingency. So, like, that's right there. Next slide, please. So Title V fund, I want to put a little note there that 99% of their permits were billed in August, and less than 1% of their title permit fees are currently outstanding, which is a AR turnaround that I'm sure everyone here would love. So it's up 40% from last year, and we are 115% above or at budget. And the reason for this is because, as I understand it from Max, there was an increase in the permit fee according to the state. So they increased the percentage cost, and we're reaping the benefits. And then the personnel on this one is down, and that is mainly due to allocation and staffing. And then materials and services is up, but it's in line with where we should be on the budget. So that is on purpose. Next, thank you. So the tag fund, which is our fund that does not show revenue until the end of the year. And I have if we did it the same way on the side, since he just did accrual and didn't recognize any revenue until the end of the year. And if we accrued this, then our revenue would be higher as well. So Q1 last year would have been 223, and this year we would be at 247. That would be a year-over-year increase of 11%. So we are at 18% of the budget for it, or 9%. And that is not terribly surprising, considering that the main driver is home heating upgrades, and the urgency in the summer would be low. This is the only balance sheet that is different, really, because it's not supposed to have a fund balance. These will be either, cash and AP or AR and AP, depending on what they have on hand, because they're not allowed to have a fund balance. This right here is AR and AP. Okay, next slide. All right, Aerometrics. I was not planning on going on a deep dive because I feel like you've all heard way too much about this. But if you want to know more, feel free. I will cover it. It's I guess the main point that I would have is the expense is mainly driven from sampler inventory, which was actually 63% of all expenses from this period. All right, and now I'm open to questions.
I don't want to bog everybody else down with minutia that only people like me would care about, but I would love sometime if we could go over the allocation process, because ours, my agency bills government contracts, and so I know I have a very rigid set, and I'm sure you do too. I'm just not understanding it here, but I don't want to drag all these folks through that. So if we could chat sometime, that'd be great.
Great, and it's in improvement status.
Yeah.
What was handed to me was not great, it's getting better, and Jenilee's help, so
Any other questions?
just FYI that, okay, thank you.
Yeah, well, green eye shade people, I'm really grateful for the work you're doing.
Yes, it's a great asset to LRAPA to have.
All right, moving on to item 11, which is permitting rules, public hearing request. Max, you guiding this one?
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, board. Max, I believe the operations manager. And we have a set of slides, about 10 slides that loosely follow the memorandum or, the agenda item for this eventual action that we'll ask you to take. So while I'm just pulling that up, I'll just explain how this is going to go. So I'm going to cover the first part of the agenda, the memo, by going over the issue statement and rule history, and then I'll pass it off to Jonathan, who's going to run through the proposed rules that essentially follows the list of bulleted items that are categorized as strengthening and streamlining in the memo. So we'll have plenty of time to answer questions at the end, but feel free to stop us as we go through. And then after the discussion, we'll come back to the board's options for consideration and staff recommendation. So as far as the issue statement, the rules in the board packet are revisions primarily to align our rules with DEQ's rules. The EQC, or the Environmental Quality Commission, adopted DEQ's corresponding proposed rules in November of 22. And that's primarily what we're doing now, is to align our rules with theirs. As far as a bit of history, the board approved the last major set of comprehensive rule changes in January of 2018. So it's been about 5 years since we did a big overhaul. There was a more narrower set of changes that the board adopted to incorporate some provisions to the Clean Air Oregon program to allow us to charge fees to do that work. But really, yeah, it's been about 5 years. So that's what we're trying to do, is catch up to some of the things that DEQ's done. We do also anticipate DEQ going through a fee increase for their ACDP and Clean Air Oregon fees this year. And so we're prospectively including those in this real package as well, but Jonathan will go into that a bit more. And then just to orient you on these attachments, A, B, C, and D, attachment A is about the 300-page document that has the red line strikeout version of the rules. Attachment B is a crosswalk summary that we have to produce for EPA and DEQ's review. It goes through each and every individual rule and explains the change that we made and why we made that change and whether or not it's included in our state implementation plan or SIP or not. Attachment C is the so-called staff report. It's the notice of proposed rulemaking. And then attachment D is sort of an abridged version, the Cliff Notes version, if you will, of the significant changes. That's the document that we used to walk through the changes with the Citizens Advisory Committee at their November meeting that Jim mentioned. So with that, I think I will just pass it on to Jonathan to go over the bullet points in the memo and the significant rule changes.
So what Max has highlighted here are what he considers the four main changes that are happening in the rules. I want you to realize there are a huge number of rule changes happening if you look through the packet. These are kind of the biggest of the changes that are occurring, and we'll go into each one of these. But the first thing is we're eliminating what we call plant site emission limits that are generic. Right now, if you're below a certain emission threshold, we just set you prescriptively at what we call the federal significant emission rate for that pollutant. So if you're emitting 1 ton of sulfur dioxide, for example, we're going to set you at 39. And the reason why this was set back in 2001 is DEQ was attempting to reduce their workload. They hoped that if they set these generic limits, that as people moved up and down, we wouldn't have to do the workload of changing permits. Ali and company have decided that they want to follow a more traditional approach. It is very unusual to have a generic emission limit in the United States. So this was an Oregon specific thing. We're making some changes to the notice of construct approvals. You recall in our program, we essentially have 3 parts. We have notices to construct, we have our air contaminant discharge permits, and if you're big enough, you have a Title V permit. We're essentially streamlining and making the notice to construct process a little bit more prescriptive. Secondly, this is a big one, air quality modeling. Previously, air quality modeling in the state has only occurred for the biggest projects, which we call new source review. We're planning to start to use air quality modeling to show to the public smaller sources are complying with the national ambient air quality standards. And lastly, this one here, I don't even know why we ever allowed this. Usually this is done by enforcement discretion, but in the rules, you could actually run for 48 hours without your pollution control device, depending on your situation. That should really never have been in there, ever. Now let's go into a deep dive. So I said that we're taking away the plant site emission limits. This has caused some problems, especially when you're taking a permit out to public comment. The public really doesn't understand why we have these limits that are really high for certain sources. So what we're essentially doing is replacing all generic limits with what the facility can actually do. And by actually do, I mean what is commonly called potential to emit. It does cause us a little bit of problems with some facilities. A lot of facilities run one shift, and we need to say, okay, we're going to set your potential to emit at whatever you could possibly do, assuming 3 shifts, 8,760 hours a year. So we need to make these companies think in terms of what they could be doing if they actually ran all their equipment wide open. The other thing it's really done for us is that without the generic limits, we're actually going to be able to determine whether somebody is complying with the ambient air quality standards. We won't have these fake limits anymore. So this is a big change, and is actually requiring more workload on staff to get this information and help our companies calculate what they really can do. Next. The NC approvals is mostly affecting our lower level NC approvals. Right now, we have a type 1 that has a 10-day approval. It's been rewritten to be like, if you meet the qualifications, it's just you go and you build it, and thank you very much. Let us know. But we do give them the option to have LRAPA concur, and that allows us to have a 30-day look at what they're saying, and then we'll say, yes, you are a type 1. So it gives them a little bit more protection from enforcement action if they're wrong on what they consider to be a type 1. A couple of other things are mostly clarifying wording. Some of the wording in the notice to go was not clear even to staff or the companies, and so we cleaned that up in conjunction with DEQ. The last one is kind of interesting. It used to be that you could get a notice to construct and it never expired. You could build something that we authorized you to build 20 years ago. Well, that's really unusual, another Oregon kind of specific thing. From now on, you get 18 months to build it. If you don't build it, that authority disappears, and we can give extensions to that authority. Next. Air modeling, this will definitely create a workload across the board. Sort of mixed bag around the United States. Some agencies actually check to see if a facility is in compliance through air quality modeling with the ambient air quality standards. Some people do minor sources, some people only do the major sources. Oregon is moving baby steps towards establishing whether minor sources are in compliance with the ambient air quality standards. This is not the full enchilada, which be the gold standard is we model every source at the facility and compare. Currently, the approach is only new equipment or replaced equipment coming in will be modeled by itself. So you would be hard pressed to blow the ambient air quality standard just for new equipment. And on a call-in priority list, we will slowly expand to full facilities. Next. I'm not going to really talk about this one. It's pretty explanatory that this should never have been in there. We're just going to take it out. The opportunity to continue to operate is still there, but it should always been on enforcement discretion. If somebody's just going to run 48 hours and give us you know, the middle finger, well, we're gonna do enforcement on them. But if they have rationales why they need to continue to operate, equipment has gone bad, the bag house has gone down and they can't shut down their equipment safely, or it would cause, it might damage the equipment, then we're going to use discretion on that issue.
I'm trying to remember, it seems like Seneca at one point had to turn off controls for one thing so they could test nitrous oxide. So they were actually in violation of the one because they had to turn that off to
Sometimes there
test
are
it.
those
So
weird
is that
cases.
the sort of thing where
That
you're
would
talking
be an
about?
enforcement discretion, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there have been other cases where facilities have had a fire that damaged their control equipment. It took them months to get that back on. Sierra Pine had a variance where they, essentially paid a fee to continue that allowance.
So they have to come to us to ask for that waiver, determine whether it's urgent enough to.
Yeah. In fact, it's a violation not to tell us at all.
That kind of makes a consent thing and we'll look the other way kind of a little tough, huh? Right? Yeah, okay, that's what I thought you'd say, yeah.
Next slide.
Howard.
Oh, sorry.
With regards to small sources, like say if they're minors or hazardous air pollutants. And I know, you're gonna look at PTE, but is the agency or the state gonna be looking at requiring any fence line monitoring, for major or minor HAP sources, looking at fence line concentrations and things like that?
Not as a general rule, no. We have done some stuff as an agency, but unless it's, required by rule, we would have to use our own funds to go out and do it. So as a general rule.
Okay. So I guess I'm, kind of curious, for what would normally be, I guess, when your general discharge permits, like say, auto body refinishing, where theoretically, yeah, they could run, 24/7, but, they generally don't do that. I mean,
Well, I was a little bit flippant. So there are you can take into account physical and operational limitations, but they have to be real, not that they say we're just not going to do this. Let's say they can only physically get 25 cars through a month because they need to dry them in this way and they're sitting in that booth while they're drying, then they can justify that to us as part of calculating the potential to emit.
Yeah, okay. Or you could place limits on.
Or they can ask for
material
limits, that is allowed
limits.
to,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, thank you.
This is a more, it's kind of like a running list. So you saw the big four and now we're just kind of walking down through. Simple air contaminant discharge permits usually are small sources, don't usually change a lot. So we're extending the permit term from 5 to 10 years. Of course, they can still be modified, but as a general rule, they aren't changed very often. This is a wonky thing. Major source permits like NSR, which means prevention of significant deterioration, or non-attainment NSR permits, they will no longer have construction permit expiration dates. So they'll live forever as a permit and then they'll be incorporated to Title V. It's kind of an EPA thing. Right now, we get the worst renewal applications possible, basically a one pager. It would be a lot easier to staff to get a more complete renewal application, which is what we're now going to be requiring. We have right now a short-term activity permit, but it's very restricted in what it can be used for. In other states, they have research and testing exemptions. So this will start to serve that aspect. A company wants to do something that's kind of temporary. It's a research project, or they want to tweak something and see what it does. This will give them the authority to do that for a short term. I think it's a maximum of 60 days. So very, very short. And typically these do not allow for like a permanent change. It's like go in, do your test, get it done. And if you need a permit, then you stop everything and you come back to us to get the permit to make it permanent. Max is proposing to put the annual 4% fee increase that we have for all ACDP permitting activities onto CAO activities, which right now have not increased since the program we had authority to run the program. And then a kind of a new thing, we talked about the notices of construction. There are 4 types. 3s and 4s have fees associated with those permitting actions. Right now, type 2s do not, and they do take a bit of time. So we're proposing to recover that staff time through a flat fee on type 2 construction notices. Next. Clarification on when a permit becomes effective. Not that exciting. Clarification on which sources actually require an air contaminant discharge permit. That's mostly wordsmithing. Clarification that some Title V sources may actually have to pay fees beyond the Title V fees. So in this case, if they did a type 2 change, as we just saw, we would be asking them to pay the $720 fee that we're proposing. Clarification on when a permit can be reinstated if they didn't bother to renew it on time, as in it expired, or they never bothered to pay their fees. Kind of exciting, first time ever, we're adding a new hazardous air pollutant to the list of hazardous air pollutants, which is 1-bromopropane. And this one I'm excited about. We're switching the method 9 opacity compliance. Right now, we use a very odd 3-minute aggregate in any 1 hour. So you have to sit there watching the stack essentially for an hour, and then every minute gets, okay, of the minutes we watched, which would be, well, a lot. Can we find 3 minutes in that whole thing that exceeded the opacity? So we're going to move to the more traditional 6-minute average to determine compliance, which is what DEQ does now and what EPA has pretty much always done. And most states use the 6-minute average. Also makes it easier for some other people, if you're using a continuous opacity monitor, typically they come from the manufacturer trying to do a 6-minute average, so we have to have them reprogrammed. Next. I think it's back to Max.
Yeah, back to me. So you can see we're here at the January 2024 board meeting, but really this work began when the EQC adopted these rules in November of 2022. We've been working on the package since then, so over 12 months. And to that end, I'd like to thank Jonathan as the primary rule wrangler, but also acknowledge that Beth Erickson, our permit writer, helped us with that, and Katie Eagleson, as well as Travis putting together this presentation, and Heather's work on getting the PDFs in your board package today. But yeah, so if the board does approve this, authorize us to hold a public notice period and have a hearing, we'll get the public comment out on notice shortly. It has to go through a dual process, so it'll go through DEQ's Gov delivery and our notice list. We currently, if you do approve this, we would have a hearing at the April board meeting. And then eventually we would try to get on an EQC meeting. I believe they have a meeting scheduled in 2024 in May, late May and late July. So depending on the timing on when we get through with this and the room that the EQC has on their agenda, we'll either go to the May or the July EQC meeting. And so they have to review all our rules. The ones that are SIP, they have to approve those. So if it's something that's going to change the Oregon State Implementation Plan and DEQ's Division 200, it has to not only be reviewed, but it has to also be approved by the EQC. Once EQC approves it, the DEQ submits that change to the EPA on our behalf. And then the EPA reviews that and eventually puts it into the Federal Register. There is some economy of scale because the EPA is also currently reviewing DEQ's corresponding rule changes. So they haven't put DEQs into the Federal Register, so I imagine it might be a similar parallel process. That is about all I have for y'all, unless you have any questions.
As you see, there's at least three options that they've offered, the staff has offered that possibly be something we could discuss here, but given that, do I hear a motion?
No, not yet. Well, I'd have discussion
I'd like to
beforehand or whatever.
I'd like to move, if the board approves, staff to conduct a public hearing on proposed changes to LRAP as their quality regulations.
I'll second that.
All right, now we can go into discussion, Jeff.
He had his hand up first. Well, no, go ahead. Yes. There's a couple items, a couple of questions I have in regards to, can I assume that all our permittees will be given a copy of this, or at least sent or advised that, as opposed to just having to catch it on the media?
Yeah, that's a good question, Joe. Yeah, so we do have people that are signed up to receive rulemaking notices. So we have an email list, but we'll also be sure to send the notice directly to our facility contacts so that they get that and don't rely on passively receiving it.
That's a very good thing. I appreciate that and support that. Secondly, were any of these rules, when they were written, was there any consideration or questioning of the permittees as to what type of negative impact it could cause to their businesses and our employers in this area? Because that, to me, if I was to try to get something done, I would try to anticipate what kind of pushback I'm getting before I lit the fire. And I'm just wondering if that kind of work has been done to see or anticipate if any of the permittees have some real angst with this. I can see that some of them may have some significant angst. And then if we're, there's a lot of definitive terms being used here. This is what we're gonna do. This is what we're gonna do. And we haven't even got to the hearing, which would seem as though we're not receptive to changing any of it. And so that has my concern.
Right, yeah, so on that, the notice of proposed rulemaking does go into fiscal impacts that we anticipate. Businesses, whether they're small or large businesses, government entities, we have certainly have government entities that are on permit as well. So we analyze that as part of the fiscal impact. There is a statement of need that goes through what the issue is, what we're trying to solve, and how we expect that to be the correction to solve that problem. So there is some of that. We cover alternative options that we've considered. There were not many options to consider alternative options because we have to be at least as stringent as DEQ, and it does make a lot of sense to be consistent. That our 36 counties in the state, it'd be strange for us to be very out of step with the other 35.
Yeah, and I understand that, and if there's laws or OAR that says we must do this, this, and this, that's moot to me because can't do anything about that. We're not legislators, but on this other things where we have discretion or flexibility in that, I'm hoping that we still, even if it doesn't seem like the norm, because I mean, DEQ, they're doing what they want. They're talking about less staff and they don't have the staffing, but they just added 10 new FTEs and just increased rates by 82% over the next 2 years. To me, it's hard for me to feel sorry for them or feel sorry for the regulation end of things when it's on the backs of our employers and our businesses. So I personally would, just me talking, everybody else can have their own opinion, is that I think we should be looking at from the perspective of the permittees and the businesses, because they are our employee hubs and our citizens' employment. And when we negatively impact them, that's going to affect the bottom line and affect our employers. Just putting that out there.
Howard, did you have
Yeah, just a question. I mean, what happens if LRAPA did not adopt these rule changes that were consistent with DEQ's regulations?
Yeah, I mean, so we would just continue with this. A lot of these elements of our program would continue to be different, and businesses that are located outside of Lane County and also have businesses in Lane County would have different sets of rules that they would have to get used to. Consultants that help them with their projects would also have to learn our rules and DEQ's rules. So that's one aspect that would be different.
Well, it'd be pretty inconsistent. I mean, some of these wouldn't some of these not be as stringent as DEQ's rules?
Right, yeah, if you look at that, I think it was attachment D, the so-called roadmap, it categorizes each of those changes as needing to be changed due to stringency, where we're changing it to be consistent, or we're actually being different, and that's called other. So there are a couple categories where we're being different from DEQ, but generally it's, yeah, to be as stringent or as consistent.
So those other ones are the specific rules that where LRAPA does have some discretion as to what to do, but whatever they do, it's still consistent with DEQ. It's just how you apply them. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. A couple of cases we're being more stringent, or another case where we've identified a change that DEQ also will be changing in a future rulemaking. So we're kind of getting ahead of DEQ on that. So we're one of those.
Thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, Joe killed my big question, which was, do we send them out? Because I do think that's important as well, you know, give folks an opportunity to see what's coming down the road. The other comment I wanted to make is that one of the changes I remember seeing was actually, you know, using state code by reference, which I would always encourage, you know, so that way when their rules change, we don't have to change ours. Boy, as often as we can do that, I really encourage us to do that.
Me too.
Dylan?
Yeah, I was just gonna just voice concern about giving, any one constituency early access to voice whatever opinions they have about this rather than just relying on the public comment period, right? That's built into this process, right? So, just thinking like, I don't think it makes sense to do special outreach to certain businesses when, what we're going to be voting on today or our next item is going to be just sending this to public comment, right? So that's my opinion. And I also would just agree with, or just kind of along the thinking that Howard was doing, say like, it is really concerning to me to have a conversation about having inconsistency with the statewide rules, and especially if LRAPA is offering less stringent rules than the state. I mean, we have to be thinking about the significant impacts that bad air quality has on our community when we're thinking about these rules, not just purely the economic burden that they put on employers.
David?
Yeah, thank you. Just before I leave, sorry, I gotta make another meeting, but typically what happens in the county, we get some of these things coming at us, and it seems like Lane County always does above and beyond the minimum requirement. So my comment would be similar to what everybody else is thinking too, is I'm here to do the minimum the state requires us, but nothing more. So, thank you.
Thanks. So Max, all these sounded like it was gonna take some more staff, more effort from the staff to it. But have we looked at what we would have to do, or are we just gonna get more blood out of this turnip?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for the short-term NACS modeling and additional modeling that Jonathan mentioned, that the rules would require up sources. There is a modeling review fee. It's about 10,000. I think it's 9,682, but don't quote me. But yeah, approximately 10,000 for each modeling review that it requires the use of AirMod, which is the EPA dispersion modeling, EPA approved dispersion model. So there are what are called short-term emission thresholds or sets. So if a facility has a piece of equipment, they can show that their, for example, emissions of PM 2.5 are less than 3 pounds per day. They're below that set or short-term emission threshold, they don't have to go through dispersion modeling. So there is an off-ramp for smaller sources. And of course, we'll offer business assistance if it's a small business that doesn't have a lot of sophisticated help. We can help them with their modeling.
And just to confirm, none of our rule changes exceed the state's. They either meet or exceed.
The one aspect where we are more stringent technically, or I don't know, a lawyer could argue that we are more stringent. So DEQ's, like I said, it has this rulemaking planned in 2024, where they'll increase their asbestos fees, their ACDP fees, their Clean Air Oregon fees, all by 3%. LRAPA's rules already have a provision in our rules that they increase by 4% each year on July 1st. So we would be 1% higher. I don't know if that's more stringent or not. Might be something for the Department of Justice to weigh in on.
But that's for permitting fees, not
Thresholds of.
thresholds of
Correct, yeah, not
pollutants, yeah.
emission standards, yeah.
Emission standards were on point with
Exactly,
DEQ
yeah.
and not trying to exceed.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that point in regulation is equal.
Yep.
So, clarification question, this packet is public domain, correct, already? Based
It's on the
this?
website, yes.
Right, so it's not being limited to the public before anybody else.
Right.
So,
Right.
so the public has access to this right now. That's why I'm just making sure that our permittees get a copy of it so they can have it in hand, but the public does have possession of this. Thank you.
Yeah, and if I could comment on that, sorry, Mike, before you.
No, you're
I
fine.
just want to mention that that is a clarification we got from DEQ's rules coordinators that they had an issue where if you're noticed in the news that the climate change program at DEQ had some legal challenge, and that was the aspect that they were deficient in, was that they relied on government delivery to message the rule change when they actually should have also directly emailed their Title V sources, so,
And we're doing both,
yeah, that.
so.
Yeah.
But that answers the question for public access.
I would offer, if there are stakeholders we also feel giving notice to, I'm totally, it's a public process, so, I mean, I'm totally supportive. I think this directly impacts our permittees, so we should do that for sure, but I have no objection to, especially if it's electronic notification where it doesn't cost us any money, why would we not notify any stakeholders?
We have an email list, so.
Yeah, I'm saying that's what I thought too. We
Yeah.
encourage them to be on our email list.
That's what I was gonna chime in and say, we have different categories that people can sign up to of information that we serve, and there is a general category that people will send, and what we mean by general is every notice that we send out, we are also going to include the general. And then those who want their more specific things like home heating, rulemaking, outdoor burning, there's different categories, cleaner Oregon. So using that is one of our avenues, and anybody who subscribed to general will see, hey, there's something that could be of interest to you.
Any other questions? So the motion made was to authorize the public hearing on the proposed revisions to the LRAPA air quality permitting rules for the April 11th, 2024 board meeting. I got that right now.
Correct.
All right, we take that to a vote, please.
Chair Cutchin,
Aye.
Vice Chair Saxon.
Aye.
Director Fleck,
Hi.
Director Hensley.
Yes.
Director Keating. Director Johnston.
Aye.
Director Level, Director Plummer, and Director Kushner.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Heather. Motion passes. To that would be upcoming appointments and board committees. I'll ask now of the directors. We have 3 minutes left. Do we need to table some of these to the next meeting? Who can stay? Who has to leave?
I need to go.
Same.
Are we losing a quorum yet?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so we're still in quorum.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for the time to give us.
Yeah.
Thanks. They're short, we'll go quick. There's not much left.
So this is upcoming appointments on boards and committees, and Travis, are you doing this one?
Yes, I have this one. So the staff report that was included in your board packet is essentially an overview of our citizen advisory committee, the budget committee, as well as the board of directors. What's on there first is the current vacancies or terms that are expiring or have expired, like Evelina, her term expired last year, but she's still, I think, engaged in it, so we'll have to reapply for that. I think what's most important here to note, though, for the board is that the board needs to, at the next meeting, the February meeting, vote on who the chair and the vice chair is going to be. At the end of the staff report is a historical look back of all of the people who held those positions and the representations of the cities, municipalities and governments that represented. Traditionally, it's been the chair kind of falls off, the vice chair becomes the chair, and someone's elected to the vice chair position. That's not something that has to be followed, but that's just been the historical approach. And then another important detail too is the budget committee members. So that is the table there on the second page, and it says not yet confirmed on who, we outreach to the budget committee members to say, hey, you're on our budget committee, but it's been a while since we chatted. Let's just check in to make sure you're still able to be there. We have heard back from Steve for Springfield, as well as Dawn from Oak Ridge, who said that they can participate and join the CAC. Have not yet heard back from Ruth, Lisa, or Adam, and Michelle and Robert. Oh, that Michelle's actually should be involved.
And Robert is not going to be able to, so I will seek another applicant.
Okay,
Appointment.
awesome. And so then I guess to kind of name some names here, Mike and Dylan, at least for the city of Eugene, there are two for sure, but potentially more budget committee vacancies. Generally, it's any member of the public can be a part of the budget committee so long as they live in Lane County and then are representing sort of the area that they are. So it can be someone you know, it could be an acquaintance or anybody who has that civic minded sort of approach. If you find someone and they're interested, you can connect them with Heather or myself and we can say, hey, great, and kind of start that process because we need to set those appointments for the February meeting as well as we get into budget season. So that's the super quick of that effort.
Travis, do the budget committee members have a specified tenure in our rules at all?
In like what sense do you mean?
3 years?
Yes, it's 3 years, and then they have to kind of be reappointed to that.
So for like Dawn Kenyon, has she been in it for 3 years? Is that why she's on?
Yeah, so the term ends February 2025.
Okay.
So kind of connecting or checking to see that, so she's still A-OK until next February. It's February 20, because we're in 2024. So
Okay,
she's
so she has
still
another year.
yes.
Okay, all right.
And
I was just wondering whether I should take it to account or not.
yeah, so I think that's something to keep in mind for next year.
Yep.
But for now, that's okay.
Okay. Anything else on this? Please.
And just so we're clear, I'm clear as I'm thinking about this recruiting folks, the ask of them is to attend 3 meetings.
It's the March,
April, and May.
And May, but are we doing?
But we will have to do a supplemental budget this year, so there will be an additional. So you could say generally always 3 and for March, April, May, but depending as the years, there could be an additional
could be a
one for
supplemental.
supplemental
Yep.
budgets.
Okay.
Are we required to bring in budget committee members for a supplemental budget?
Not if it goes over a certain threshold. So if the amount of change doesn't go over that percentage of the contingency, no.
Because we typically don't as a
But
city.
depending with LRAPA usually doesn't do, we were debating that it might be wise for transparency and to let them know. So, but we're still working on what the grand total will be. So that will dictate if it's a mandatory or not mandatory once we finalize the numbers. Because our targeted goal is February, March to make sure we get supplemental budget done, because we don't want to go over budget.
And it may not need a budget committee because the architect said maybe next fiscal year.
Right, so we might be under that 10 or 15% threshold of the contingency amount.
So Travis and Heather, what practically is the deadline for getting folks connected with you to make sure that they can be confirmed at the February meeting?
We have, historically, budget committee members have been appointed to the budget committee at the start of the budget committee. So as long as, the sooner the better, but if it's like the day before the meeting, someone's finally like, I'm on board.
Yep.
The next day at the meeting, as kind of a first thing on the to-do would be appointing them to the committee and then we can move forward.
Yeah,
So,
you would open a regular meeting, appoint them,
yeah,
go into the budget.
so
Okay.
preferably by February.
Yep.
But if
Got it.
needed, we could get it done right before.
All right.
And is there anything different we need to be sensitive to, since you will not be at the February meeting and they'll be choosing a new chair, they'll just vote for you while you're up.
Let it happen the way.
Thank you for your service.
So they vote for you.
That's an expensive flight. That was unintentional. It's very expensive.
Well, you can't say no if they nominate you, that's right, is that what you're saying?
All right, so next is employee recognition, Susanna.
So like a few months back, we went through the history of our agency and showed the amazing amount of longevity. I let the board know that as anniversary dates come up and we hit in those 5 brackets that we would do. So we're here to let Lance, because in January, he hit the 30 year. So he's officially been an employee with us for 30 years. and does such an outstanding job. So we have, let's stand up now that you get it to me. Watch that.
30 more.
Yeah. 30 more.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, yeah.
Yeah, it was just a few months ago, it was my 25 years, so the next 5 years go fast.
I know.
Accelerating.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Right, director's report.
So I want to highlight just a couple things real quick, and then if there's questions, so in the general comments there in the beginning, we do have a new environmental engineer starting. His name is Chu. He did have to, he's moving here from Chicago, so he's backdated his start date to the 22nd from the 16th. So we're excited to have him on board. He is filling the vacancy for Katie leaving. And so that's exciting. So we're looking forward to him. He comes with lots of education, a master's degree, and a lot of experience through school. So this will be his big job, but we're excited for him to be on the team. He comes with really strong references. So I want to let you know that. And then to Matt's question about legislator, Max and I and Travis have been working on the ask for this coming up one. We basically are putting together a proposal for some one-time funds to help, because as the finance software was in desperate and almost broken, all of our operations side software is needing to be accelerated. The lymph node process has been super slow for little tiny buckets of funding over the last 10+ years. So we're putting a one-time ask so we can accelerate that to get. That looks like from staff meetings and reviewing together as a team, that we think the lymph node system will work. We just need to accelerate it. So we are putting an ask in there. And we're also looking for additional funding to help offset some of the staffing for the extra workloads and things like that. So we're still working on that wordage. We're hoping to wrap that up, and we meet with her on this Friday to see if that seems, we did a preliminary with her, but now we'll give her an official. That seems reasonable. Then if she feels that's okay, then they'll present that going forward. And
And who's the her?
Erin, what's her last name?
Erin Keverbach, who is DEQ's legislative liaison. And so she's working with us to guide the legislative concepts that will be put into DEQ's request budget that will go to before the legislature.
Yeah, so we're working on that. And when we have that document finalized and she feels that that's comfortable, I'll make sure I send that out to all of you to read that as well. And those are the only real big changes on there, and just kind of give you a general update on the other goals and where we're at in the process with those. But I wanted to highlight those two things.
So I'm noticing from our charts, it looks like our Eugene Springfield PM25 has been right at the threshold. Is that something we're concerned about, or?
No,
I'm just kind of looking at the graph here.
Spike in December, is
The
that-
spike, we have a spike in November.
yeah, those are all
spike
from
in
wildfire issues.
Oh, even in November,
Oh,
December?
and the other ones, yeah, but those are, so these charts can be slightly misleading.
Okay,
Because the standards are based on, the 98th percentile of a 3-year average. And so you might get a spike that's right near the standard. But if, the way we sample now would take 8 of those for a year to get us near the standard. And then you still average that for 3 years. And so,
okay.
but that's typical in the wintertime. It depends really on weather patterns, on how high they get. The overall trend is going down, especially in Oak Ridge where we've had a lot of work.
Yeah, and I would-
It'd be wood smoke though, wouldn't it?
Yes, in the winter.
And so that spike that you're kind of seeing there and there in right around Thanksgiving, that was, so this year in Eugene Springfield, LRAPA called a Red Homewood Heating Day, and it has been since 2019, since we called a Red Homewood Heating Day in the Eugene Springfield area. That was because we had a very long pronounced period of air stagnation. I do think what was very interesting about that is Oak Ridge throughout that entire period was able to stay just as a yellow day, and we did not have to call a red day in Oak Ridge. And generally it's reversed. Usually we're calling the red days in Oak Ridge and Eugene Springfield still in the yellow. And I do think a big components to that is some of the Homewood heating programs, the targeted airship grant, when they first started, their targeted pilot group was people in the Willamette City, thank you. which is close to the monitor where a lot of that smoke tends to pollute. And then I think that the community firewood program really being more successful this season in terms of providing dry season wood into the community has also been a very vital and important component of Oak Ridge having a better time. And all of that funding, including support for the community firewood program, is from our target. So remain happy that the EPA decided to fund those things.
Nice.
Do you have any updates on air metrics, where we are with that?
So we, at this point, are working with the attorneys to make sure where our boundaries are and what we can do. We're closing up the last of the invoices that are outstanding. And then Lance has been talking with AR, right? ARA about wanting to purchase it, and they're looking at options of what they will offer us. So that's kind of where we're at with that. So we're hoping we'll have something on the February board meeting, have it finalized and wrapped up and ready to close the door.
You think they'll get back to us fairly soon?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's just, yeah, there's a lot of semantics and talking to the lawyer, make sure we're crossing all our Ts and dotting our Is. So it's all about board, but I think by February we'll have something.
It's great.
And has it been fairly smooth with, Trinidad has left now, is that
Yeah,
right?
his last
As of
day was
January.
January. And yeah, it was really smooth. He worked
Good.
hard to make sure whatever we had open was done and completed and ready to go, not leaving a lot for Lance to wrap up. And we have a detailed list of what potentials are still sitting there, and the inventory's been counted and allotted for and updated. So yeah, we're in a good stable spot.
Any reaction from existing old stuff? Have they been notified?
No, I mean, I let them know that, we let them know that Trinidad's gone. You know, we haven't said anything really about what's happening with their metrics yet. Hopefully that'll be a pretty smooth transition when the time comes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I think that wraps it up. Motion to adjourn.
Hey, Brian, could I?
Yeah, please.
Just one thing, I should have said this earlier, the team did a great job kind of summarizing 500+ pages of rule changes. My heart skipped a beat when I opened the packet, but you guys did a great job kind of summarizing what we're changing. So nice job, Max and Jonathan, and maybe a lot of other folks I know worked on it, but well done.
Yeah, it's a shame David left because he did respond and was like, what is this?
A little bit.
Yeah, it's a little overwhelming.
Thanks, there was no exam at you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to adjourn.
Okay. Adjourn.
And I closed. Good to go now.